Next panel, which is focused in on high-path avian influenza and looking at some of the issues associated with that. We're going to have two speakers on this panel. Our first speaker is Dr. Jon Moyel. I have to call you doctor?
Only here.
Only here. So Dr. Jon Moyel is the extension poultry specialist for the University of Maryland. His research and outreach have included broiler production management, reproductive management, and behavior in broiler breeders, improving organic and free-range production, along with looking for natural compounds that can be used to help growers prevent disease and control outbreaks. And I'm going to stop there. And then our second speaker, we're great to have with us. We have one attorney on the panel. So we have Brook Duer, who is a staff attorney at the Penn State Center for Agricultural and Shale Law, and he has been there since 2019. Prior to that, he was an attorney with the Pennsylvania Department of Ag for 12 years, serving 8 of those as chief counsel to the agency and supervising the agency's legal office. Prior to that, he practiced law in Lancaster County for 18 years. Brook received a BS in communications from Indiana University of Pennsylvania and a JD from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. So I'm going to hand it over to them. And I believe we have a video to start this all off because it sums up sort of what avian influenza outbreaks would be like and what they're about to talk about. I believe. Oh, the sound's not working.
Oh, no.
So we'll go back. Can we restart this part?
This is the best part of the whole talk.
We didn't know we had to have my laptop hooked up to sound, so this is apologies on us for not being prepared for this. Yeah, we forgot to remind him that we needed sound for this. I know. I did. I'm going to hand this to you. I'm going to hand this to you and we'll go back. And then you can start from there. Yeah.
Who can lip sync?
We apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm going to take off this stage.
All right, that didn't, that's bad. All right, so that didn't work out as well as we'd hoped, but just the expense. I was asked today to talk a little bit about my experiences with avian influenza. So AI, remember that, all you younger people, make sure you say what your acronyms are so we're not all confused. Because how many of you, if I'd have just put AI, how many would have thought artificial intelligence? Okay, where's all our reproductive physiologists? How many would have thought artificial insemination? See, there's a few of us. See, we got this down. So AI is a very important thing. We define these things. But like Neith, I'm employed by the University of Maryland, so we have to go through a couple slides. First, our required slide is, it says we just don't discriminate. We really, don't care. But that gets longer every time I see it. So next year, I think it's going to take 2 slides. And the next one is, see, Neith showed this same slide. Languages. It actually plays sound too if we had it still hooked up. But again, it goes through a lot of different languages. So again, basically, it goes through how you can sue us if we don't treat you well. Let's see. So, and I have one more. How many lawyers are in the room? All right, a lot of lawyers. See, I threw this one in there too. Use of a website, brand, or product is not an endorsement, and while the views I will present are my own and based on current science, in fact, they do not represent necessarily those of the university. So am I good on everything? Is there any others I forgot? Paul's giving me a thumbs up, so I'm good from the lawyer point. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit today about the avian influenza, but first off, I want to go through some basics. I have not updated these. This is updated as of yesterday. We're at currently 62.76 million birds that we've lost to avian influenza. This started in 2022. It's been going on ever since. It still hasn't stopped. As you can see, in the last 30 days, we've had 66 confirmations. I think that's, and we've seen around the nation. This is for the whole epidemic, this pandemic. You can see how many states have been affected. It's everywhere. If you really want to see a bad place to go, Iowa. If you look on there, Iowa has now lost 17.2 million chickens. They just lost another million yesterday. So again, it just keeps going up every time I look. And a lot of these birds we're losing are in the layers. And you saw that they were doing a tabletop, right? In that little video clip, they were doing a tabletop. What happens if we have avian influenza in our town? What are we going to do? We actually do practice those here in Maryland, and we practice them a lot. In fact, last week we even had one for African swine fever. So we are prepared and we do care. But if we look at what's going on, it's still around and it's out there, because in the last this is the last 30 days, you can see that Iowa and Minnesota both lost some layer farms. Again, we're looking at about 1.3 million in each of those places. That's a lot of birds. How many of y'all like your eggs? Yeah, well, maybe stock up. No. Remember how we saw that price go way up high last time? If you figure it this way, we've lost 1% of the layer flock in the last 10 days. So, and that might be an anomaly. It may quit. It may go on. We're not sure what's going to happen. But again, you can see that this is really kicking off again throughout the United States. Let's see. Okay, some basics for Maryland. Is everybody here from Maryland? Anybody from anywhere else? All right, so we're all Maryland. Well, we won't count you. You just don't worry about it. And Brooke, I know you're up north. You're a little worse. So again, in Maryland, we only had one small flock so far through this outbreak, which really amazes me, and only 4 birds. So that's not too bad. We've had 2 layer operations. Now I say 2, it's technically the same layer operation, but they're connected. Anyway, I'll show you more in a minute. And that's 1.3 million. 1 pullet flock, 300,000. 1 table egg breeders, which is interesting. That was over Washington County, if I remember right, and they lost about 24.6 thousand. And then 1 broiler flock. Now, how many of y'all know what our #1 product in Maryland is? Broilers, exactly. All right, great. Our broiler industry accounts for almost 50% of our ag. We're very concerned about our broiler flocks. Our broiler flocks, I mean, that's nothing. I mean, that one, what? It sounds terrible to say 139,000 birds is nothing. But if you look at it, we harvest out of Maryland every year 300 million, 305 million. So it's a very small percentage. And we look at this, avian influenza doesn't seem to be hurting our broilers as much as our layers and our turkeys. Our turkeys are really the ones that are taking the brunt of this. But if we look at going back on what I was saying about this happening in Maryland, I actually, tell you where I was actually like traveling. The dean had actually sent me to Kenya. I was over at Daystar University, and I was helping them build a poultry facility. And I get back on Wednesday night, late. The next day I get up, go to my office, and I'm sitting there, and I get a phone call. And it was the assistant state veterinarian. And she says, I need you at this address. I'm like, all right. So I drive to that address. And it was actually in Dover, it was the, the Department of Ag, Delaware Department of Ag. And it's the command center, because there was a disease outbreak I knew about in Delaware. and they hand me an address, and she says, "You're the site commander, go secure this site." I've never been on a farm before. I've been on a lot of farms. That didn't sound wrong. I've never been on a farm with AI before. Wow, that came out wrong. So I end up going to Cecil County. Y'all know where Cecil County is? All right, anybody from Cecil County? See, nobody. It's terrible. I wanted to hear someone go, "Yay, Cecil!" Oh. All right, so it was a layer operation. It was confirmed on March 4th, and it was technically 2 farms, but they're connected together by a belt. And what killed me is because this is already known it's there, I know it's there, but it's not released by the USDA, I'm sitting there trying to secure a site, and I'm watching across the road as they do a pheasant shoot. And I can't say anything. So it was really interesting to me, all the rules and regulations. I learned a heck of a lot really fast. So, all right. Cecil County, we all know where that is, right? We know where we are. We're here in Annapolis. So if we look where Cecil County is, see, I got a chicken there so we can all see where it is. If we zoom in on what this site looks like, here we go, the site. It's, doesn't really work. You can see there's actually like 2 farms there, but you see those belts. There's actually a belt. You can see those lines connecting them together. And so because of that, that was why we had to secure the whole site. 3 different entrances. You can see the 3 different entrances labeled. Man, heck with it. I'll just walk over here. So we had a lot to do here because you got all these entrances. So we actually had to have a biosecurity line here, here, and one up there because we had to stop all the traffic going off this farm. Because what happens if we get this off the farm? It's in our broilers, doesn't it? And then we have other problems. It gets out there and we have a lot of issues. So for me, it was a really trying time. I was getting there about 5 in the morning. I'd leave there about 10:30 at night, and the Department of Ag put me up in a hotel just down the road. It was great. But again, it was a very eye-opening experience. Like I tell them now, I could do a hell of a lot better job now than I did then, because I'd never done one before. And they did give me a binder, and that binder I've never read. I still haven't got to it, so I will before the next one. All right, you go ahead and laugh. I agree with you. So when I got there was nothing. Now, we're prepared for broilers. We are a broiler state. We have got broilers down. In fact, while we were at this site, we actually had a broiler farm in Maryland test positive. And interestingly enough, it tested positive in random surveillance, not because they're sick bird reports. But anyway, we put it down and took care of it within 24 hours. Done. This is a layer facility with 1.3 million birds. That's a totally different animal. And because of that, a broiler farm usually has an owner and an employee. So, we're set up to, biosecurity wise, all I've got to have is suits for a couple people. We can do this. I've got 60 employees, plus I've got a depopulation crew, plus I've got another crew coming in to take the birds out of the pens. I'm all of a sudden going from suiting 6 people to 70 plus. And where's our supply? So it was a really big gamble. I spent a lot of time. I think I bought every nitrile glove or any glove around in that whole area. It was pretty fun. I got one of the state assistant vets gave me her credit card, and I was running around just using it right and left. And I keep waiting for him to look at the thing because she's a black female and I'm a white male. If anybody ever looks at this and questions this, is here at the checkout counter in the line, I'm like, no one ever asked. I was amazed. Anyway, it was a really interesting thing. So as you can see here, this is after a couple days, we actually got a little shed out there. We had some supplies, not many. You can see the people are coming in. We're going to give them all their supplies. We're going to get them ready to suit up. Sadly, we didn't have the supplies we needed, so you might get a 3X and you might think you're a small, but you're getting a 3X because that's all we have. Once we hand you the supplies, you put them on, and then we're taping you in them. As you can see, you're going around. Every one of these is taped down below and up at the arms so they can't come off. So when you're going to this site, you're taped head to toe. You're going to be fitted for a mask. You're going to get a mask put on you. And your cell phone, it goes in a baggie in your pocket. You don't have your cell phone. Because when you go in, the fear of bringing some disease out, this is what we do. We did a lot of training. I cannot remember John's last name. He's a DVM, he's actually up in Pennsylvania. Great guy. I know he's worked some of your sites as well. Fluent in Spanish. Best friend I had. My Spanish is not good enough to do what he did. I could have got through it, but he was great. So we would do trainings. Here we're doing a safety training, how we have to suit people up. You can see this is still really early on. See the weather. Cold, rainy. It was miserable. Then we had to keep things going. Took us, 2 days before we even got porta potties out there. The poor ladies on the thing. The nearest Grofo was about 3 miles away. It was really tough. We've learned a lot of things. We're not going to be that bad again. So here's what we ended up doing. Here we got our biosecurity line is here. We have to wash everything coming out of there. So they'll pull in that first thing. You can see we're catching the water here. So we can pump it into tanks so we can put it through the, we just don't dump it in the environment, environmental protection. So we can take care of it properly. So we wash them and then we disinfect them, then we pull them out. Before any of those leaves, the biosecurity line has to double check and make sure. They'll go over a truck. We've sent trucks back through there. It got to where I've got to get 283 trucks of carbon onto that farm. So that's 283 trucks I have to wash off that farm. Plus, if you look in the background, look at all those semi-reefer trailers. All of those have to be cleaned inside and out to get them off the farm. It's not a simple, easy project. And when you're trying to wash a semi and they're telling you you've got 10 minutes to wash one group's saying, I want a truck every 10 minutes, and the government's telling you can't take anything off there, it's got a spot on it. So you got this whole, you're always getting yelled at. I'm gonna tell you that right now. You're yelled at all the time. You gone to one?
Yes, I've been to one.
You know what I mean? Someone's always yelling. So, come on, clicker. There we go. So this is kind of some of the stuff we had to look for. So this truck had gone through the wash, pulls up, and I look at it. What do I see? They missed a bunch, didn't they? That truck's going back in. And it really was, it took a lot of time. That's the underside of the front end of the pickup, not a pickup, of a semi-trailer. It took us a lot. The best thing about it is after you wash that truck the first time, the only thing you have to get off it the next time is because it's just a little dirt from the road. So the truckers, before they came the first time, were passing the word, get your truck washed before you go there or you'll take forever to get out. So again, we did through this. We've got it all done. We took a lot of time. We even had to wash at night because we couldn't shut down. We had to keep running. We were running we would wash trucks from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. So we had lights out there. The biggest thing I ran into too is it's March, the 1st of March. What's the temperature? Cold. You get down to, we actually at one morning we're at 25 degrees with a 30-mile-an-hour wind and they're telling me to wash trucks. How? I'm spraying water on 10,000 pounds of frozen aluminum. It's just freezing. So we had a lot of different things we had to fight our way through to get through this. And again, it took a lot of effort and a lot of manpower from a lot of different people. Again, this is just look at the biosecurity line. This crew's coming off, washing crew. We actually brought in some showers. They're sitting off to the side here where you can't see them. And so when the people would come out, they had to run through a shower. So how many of you have thought about towels? We had to try and find disposable towels. We had to find all these things you don't have thought of before all of a sudden now I need them all. So, I mean, carbon we had thought through. We thought through the water, but we hadn't thought through some of these other things as well. Let's see, anything else on that picture?
Those USDA contractor?
Yes, this is a contractor employee.
Lewis Environmental on the back, is that?
Yeah, Lewis Environmental was the contractor that had the contract, and they were the ones that were running. They were the ones doing the washing. My crew was just over making sure they did it right. So we would, and it was good. Yeah, water. How often, you're out there in a field. Where are you gonna get water from? So we were lucky, we made contact with the local fire department. We brought in water trucks. They came out a couple times a day. We went through a lot of water to get through these farms. Again, the weather was nice that day, but you can see how far that truck sunk in there. We sunk a lot of trucks. We sunk a lot of things and had a lot of fun. A lot of stuck vehicles. Now here's a happy picture. See the sun shining, the corn's growing. This is a few months later. This site took a long time because as you have a lot of birds, we have to compost everything. This is a later site. You can see they're not set up for truck washes. This is just waiting for the composting to finish up so we can check people in and out. All we have to do is run people in and out. Piece of cake. Paul's flashing me. All right. So again, this is some of the things that we looked at. This is kind of my experience, but one of the things we want to talk about is how we work together. And working together is how we're going to prevent this from coming back. And working together is one of the things we worked on when we were there. One thing we learned really early in this, extension plays a very important role. When AI hit Delaware, we pulled together an extension meeting. We had 450 growers on there. When this is going on in Maryland and everything else, the government decided they were going to run their own meeting. They got 40. They came to us. We ran another meeting. We got another 350 people. Work with the people that are already there. The people trust the extension people. They know who they are. They're in the counties. Work with them. Don't ignore them. We also know that the science, we need those USDA people. They have the backgrounds. They have the funds. They have the experience, and they have access to those resources. We need those resources. The state, They're there in the media, they're there, they've got the people, they're educated, so we've got to all work together. So working together is one thing we really learned a lot. We worked together to translate an awful lot of things. We were putting a lot of posts out in Spanish. Our website was the best we ever did, our Facebook. We were getting thousands of hits every day on our Facebook page. We were doing both English and Spanish, and then Facebook decided we were a suspicious organization and shut us down. I still don't understand that. But again, we still work together. We still work very closely with MDA, the state veterinarian's office. Shoot, I know I can call Dr. Odian right now and he'd answer the phone. It's very good to work with them. So we have this relationship and we're very lucky that way. To a lesser extent, we still work with MDE, but not as much as we do with some of the others. We do work with them on CAFOs and things like that, but we're working together. We work with growers, government employees, allied industry. Some of the things we're doing, if you're an inspector for MDA, how many farms can you go to in a day? Someone, come on, give me a number. 1. If you go to a poultry farm, you're done for the day. You're gonna go home, you're gonna wash, you're gonna clean up before you go to another farm. That's something we work with MDE as well. So they're CAFO inspectors, they're gonna visit 1 farm a day. They're not going to multiple farms because if we do, we're gonna drag disease. And we wanna prevent that. So these are some of the things we're working on going forward. You know, Paul said to put in biosecurity here, but you all don't wanna see this. Because this is like for our growers, you know, keep it simple, stupid, that stuff. Don't take your disease to town. How many of y'all seen a car like that when you're getting your coffee in the morning? This is actual photo. It's actually in Prince's hand, so anyway. You can see these things all over the place. Keep biosecurity clothing with you at all times. How many people have a biosecurity kit in their car? All right. Yeah, when you get pulled over, the police look at you really funny. Why do you have duct tape, zip ties, and gloves? So anyway, keep these with you all the time. And I would say anytime you're gonna go to a farm, I suggest you always take at least disposable booties. And I say that on a grain farm as well. We're starting to see some diseases pop up in Maryland we've never seen before. And these diseases are spread by humans. Foot baths, I hate them. I'm serious. You put a chemical in there, you gotta keep it up to date. But the thing is too, is if you read that thing, it says the contact time's 10 minutes. I actually made that comment to APHIS as I came through the Philadelphia airport. They remember me at the Philadelphia airport. When I come through there, they take my shoes and stick them in that batch for 10 minutes because they read their product. Again, we don't want shoes. We want to have shoes in every house. This is where we're going with our growers. Disposable booties, if I go there, I'm going to put them on. I'm going to walk to their first door. I'm going to put on a new pair as I go in that house. When I leave, go to the next house, I'll pull another pair on. I might have 5 pair of booties on by the time I get through the houses. Or I can take one off and put a new one on. But every house I go in, I put on a clean pair to prevent disease. Poultry litter sticks to shoes, use shoes without tread, disposable booties. Come on, I got to get to the one I want to do. All right, cell phones. How many of y'all have them? Okay, come on. Kate, you have one. I know you do. Raise your hand. So we all have them, don't we? When was the last time any of y'all cleaned your cell phone? This week? Some people are like, I've never done it. Think about it. How many of y'all, and this works for COVID too, by the way, just in case y'all worried about that still. There are a lot of diseases that this will present. I can tell you, every time I go to a farm, I have to take my cell phone out, clean it with Clorox wipes, pull off the case, go in there and clean everything. I don't want to be the one that spreads disease. So anytime, I'm going to encourage you all when you get home today to clean your phone. You don't know when the last time that was, but everywhere we go, we take these phones. Everything we touch these phones. We touch that door, we touch the phone, we touch that guy's hand, we touch the phone, yada, yada, yada. So we want to make sure we clean our phones. Inside and out, indoors. Oh, this is a beautiful picture, isn't it? See those nice sunrise? Well, it looks pretty, doesn't it? Get up there a little closer. Look what we got walking out of the house. Actually, that one just had raccoons. This is a different house. But then again, we're fighting this stuff. Keep things spilled. Manage your mortality. Buzzard's something we're working on right now. We're actually doing some research, some preliminary research. We're finding some cool results. Trying to keep buzzards off farms. We do know that they do spread disease. High five. Great. I sped up. I'll be done before then. By the way, I was just on a farm. You see that coyote they got there? Yeah, they were standing on it. So they really don't respect the coyote. It does work for geese, though, for your other farmers. We're encouraging people to keep things clean. I don't want to see this when I go on a farm. If I see this at a farm, first thing I'm going to do is have a long talk with them, because this is what I do want to see. And I mean, it just shows the level that farmers are going to. I'm seeing a lot more of this and a lot less of the last. Usually the ones that keep them dirty like that don't last long. Garbage dumpsters. Who would have thought dumpsters would be associated with disease? Oh, we got a hand up. Oh, good. Good job. So here we have it down here on the chicken house. It's right down by the chicken house. How is that going to get dumped? Where does that dump truck got to, or that garbage truck got to go? It's got to go on your farm, right? You're better off when you have birds on your farm moving it up to the end of your property. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt to take the garbage up there, but that garbage truck's not coming on your property. Actually shown that, and to actually lower the risk of disease on your property. Again, you can see all the signs. I mean, how many signs are out there telling you to stay the heck away? And kind of end with this one here. And with that, I want to thank you for your time.
Okay, this is, yeah, I'll see. Wait, I don't have to hold this thing, but we'll see if I stick to this or not. At least there is a microphone here. So while we're getting the PowerPoint set up, again, I'm Brook Duer, and I'm not from Maryland. I'm from Pennsylvania, your bad neighbor in the HPAI world. That's who I work for. I work for the law school at Penn State, and we have a thing called, I just call it the Ag Law Center. The shale end of things is all about, shale gas exploration, development, and mostly providing legal education to landowners who have, gas wells. I don't do that stuff. I am strictly an ag guy. And I was the guy that came up with the title, by the way. Does anybody know where that title comes from? See, people didn't go to Woodstock. You didn't hang around Haight-Ashbury. That's actually a song by a guy named Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks. How can we miss you if you won't go away? And that's our story for HPAI, which is how can we miss HPAI if it doesn't go away here? And this may be a permanent background disease that we're going to have to live with, from now on. This is a little bit about the Ag Law Center. I'll skip over this. I make my PowerPoints very packed full of links and things, so I'll give my PowerPoint to Paul and make sure that it's available for distribution, and you should definitely get it if you have any interest at all, because I write these things like documents so that basically so I can go back, first of all, and find all the good stuff that I had at the time, but also for you. So I was chief counsel at PDA for about 8 years. I was there for about 12 years total. And I was originally in private practice in Lancaster County, which is your very, very close bad neighbor when it comes to AI. And Lancaster County is the most concentrated cluster of poultry operations in the nation. Now, that's our website, aglaw.psu.edu. Go there sometime, scout around. There's lots of good stuff. Keep going. There's our title slide again. I want to get to the materials. Okay, the big primary sources, if you want to learn about HPAI, and I put the HP in front of it all the time, and it is the principal website that tracks all the domestic cases in the country is right there. There's also a wild bird site that USDA puts up also, because obviously we want to know what the wild bird incident rates are too. Most of those wild birds are detected by state entities testing in various ways and then sending confirmation to the National Ag or Veterinary Laboratory in Colorado. So those are the two main websites, and those are where Jon pulled these slides. And you're going to be amazed, Jon, because I have the exact same slides in here. Yes, well, I thought, maybe, he wouldn't cover this. And of course, he went right to it. So you already saw this one. Here's obviously the big number is that 62 million. Let's see if I can't get the pointer to work. Is that 62 million? And that's since this thing started in February of 2022 in the state of Indiana is where the first case was detected. Oh, now we all had, and you may or may not be aware of this, in 2015, there was a gigantic outbreak of HPAI in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin was in there. Nebraska, I think, had some. Illinois had some, but yeah, Dakota's, okay. So, and that one really got us in Pennsylvania charged up in terms of preparation, which really worked out well because we got hit. If you want to just take it on pure numbers, we got hit basically 4 times worse than Maryland did. Now, you guys had those two big operations that ended up, bringing your numbers up. We have a lot more small operations, and so our number of farms and our number of flocks was way more than 4 times what you had, and that really made our work way worse. Now, I was not, give you a little history. I was chief counsel when the one happened in 2015, the 2015 outbreak. So all this preparation that we did, I was in the middle of all that. I was gone. I went to Penn State in 2019, and so I was not there for the most recent outbreak. So I was watching that from a distance. Okay, same slides that John had up here. Here's the birds affected by the state. So you just look at the colors. The darker the green, the worse off they fared. This is the last 30 days. This is not the whole outbreak. This is just the last 30 days. So you can see who's faring badly right now in sort of what might be considered a second wave, because we had a little bit of a lull, which I have a graphic to show you. And then, same slide I think you had there. This is interesting. This is 2023 only in the grand total up in the right-hand corner. However, the green, shades, this is for the entire outbreak. It's anyway, the bottom line is, look at the shade of green. You can tell who got worse, who got hit worse. And you can see that your neighbor there, Pennsylvania, is much darker, although Maryland's a little covered by the text. Interestingly, take a look at Louisiana. Okay, no big deal. Arkansas is right there, but Arkansas was very spared. Arkansas is obviously the home of, Purdue, and or is it Tyson? Tyson. And especially the upper left-hand corner, which would be the northwest corner of Arkansas, and but Louisiana. Okay. West Virginia, what is going on there? I mean, anybody from West Virginia here? I constantly kid the gentleman from West Virginia's law school who sort of does ag law things like we do and like Mr. Gehringer does here, that what is going on there? You're right next to us in Pennsylvania who got just slammed, and West Virginia to this day is yet to have one case, not even in a little backyard flock, nothing. I don't think they're testing. I'll just say something's going on. Something is going on. Now here is this is I'm just making sure. This is recent. This is the last 30 days, so you can see who's getting hit now. And again, the state column is over on the left-hand side. So it's the same cast of characters that sort of suffered before Iowa, Missouri, gets them out, Montana. Now, some of these states are clearly in these migratory bird flyways, as they call them, and that's why they're getting hit, usually with small numbers. If you look over on the birds affected side, you see some of these, they're even in single digits now. We've had one big one there in Iowa. That's the one that I think John already mentioned. Okay, and then this is your total. Same thing John covered with you. That's your entire history here, and this is again all on the link USDA APHIS website that has all the data and is really the Bible for following this disease. Keep going. Okay, so this just by comparison, of course. So you guys had, this is the number, and then you had some pretty large ones there, but and those were layer operations too, so they were okay. It could have been bigger. So that just shows you, and I guess, yeah, they were layers because they had the belts going through where the eggs were moving, yes. So, all right, so now Pennsylvania got hit. We had 31 flocks, separate flocks. 30, that's commercial flocks. That's where they're selling product from the farm that's produced by the poultry, or they're selling the poultry themselves. We had 36 backyard flocks. That means they're not selling anything off the farm. It's just for their own consumption or whatever other interest they have in poultry, like pets. Or not even game birds, because if people raise game birds for resale, then they're a commercial flock. So we have 36 backyard. That causes a lot of trouble to a state like us trying to clean up a big mess, and then you have these 36 little tiny operations that you got to work with too, because they could end up infecting and causing the spread to something giant. It might be right next door. 15 separate counties, 4.6 million birds. Lancaster County, as I said, most highly concentrated cluster of commercial, and you throw in all of that non-commercial, the backyard stuff, the highest cluster and the most concentrated in the country. And we're right there. We're right next to you guys. Now, Pennsylvania finally has reached HPAI free status, which is the status you want under the World Animal Health Organization, WOA. And although that acronym doesn't match, I think it's WHO. OA is the way that you see it. But anyway, the bottom line is we have the status, and it comes in 4 consecutive weeks of being clean with no new detections after the final quarantine is released. And our last farm was on August 29th, 2023. And so 4 weeks after that, we finally got HPA-free status back, and that enables our products to go overseas, basically. And that we hadn't had that since April of 2022. So that's a long time with no exports. Now, our domestic market, certainly is a big part of, it's not like we're exporting all that much of our product. But, okay, so, and again, we're your big bad neighbor up there. I know that Delaware and Maryland are always concerned about us. And it's just sheer size, really, is what it comes down to. And we have the extra thing in this that no one else has, or that no one else has to the size that we have, which is the plain sect. And that's a whole animal into itself in terms of getting them to comply. How many lawyers did we have in here? Okay, get this. Every single chicken that has been killed in this outbreak, 62 million or whatever, those were all done upon the signature and voluntary consent of the owners of those birds. None of that was by government order. No one was belligerent enough to make the USDA hand them an official order that your birds must be destroyed. What happens is USDA comes in, powwows with them, there's a meeting, they end up developing a plan for the depopulation and the disposal, and it's all voluntary. Now, does the regulated community completely understand that? I've never been there to listen to the Miranda warnings, and I say that, with quotes around it. I've never been there to listen to the Miranda warnings that they tell the bird owners before they proceed on this. But this is all done voluntarily. This is like the old days when food recalls could not be ordered by FDA. This is a completely voluntary program. What would happen is if somebody would refuse to put their birds down voluntarily and just sign off on it, then you would have to end up running to court. USDA would end up having to go, wake up some judges and get an order to get this thing going. And that's never happened. That has never happened. You think it has happened?
No, I'm just thinking the state vet would be the one that would do that. He has the authority in the state.
That's true, but if there's a refusal, then, and now plain sect, different story. We ran into it now in the second wave, not the first wave that happened in 2022 into the first couple months of 2023, but in this year, 2023, we ran into some plain sect farmers who were not buying into the logic that if you have sick birds, you must depopulate them all in order to stop the spread to your neighbors. So there was this idea that we encountered, and this was mostly in duck operations, which I noticed you didn't mention ducks in here. We have a lot of plain sect farmers in Pennsylvania that are doing ducks for the East Coast markets, and they take them to these live bird markets, and so we had issues, and there was nothing to my knowledge, although I was not inside PDA, Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, at the time when this all came to light, but I do not believe that in the end anything came to a confrontation where there had to be some type of court order or mandatory order compelling someone against their will, but it was certainly on the table for discussion for the first time. And again, that's a jump of logic there. That's a leap of faith, this idea that all birds must be depopulated if one bird's got the onus. And the other thing that we encountered with plain sect farmers this year was just picking their non-sick birds and taking them to a live bird market, and maybe depopulating themselves a few of the birds that seem to be sick in some way, but taking other birds to they're not sick, we're taking them to the market, and it happened. So this is and it's not that you don't have plain sect here, obviously, we all do in this general part of the United States. It's just that the law of averages tells you that at some point we would encounter something like this. And we did, luckily, no court orders or messy litigation was needed, thankfully. Okay, let me keep going because I got a ton of stuff. Okay, this is Lancaster County, one county of the 15 in Pennsylvania that got hit. This is the totals just for Lancaster County in there. It's amazing the compact nature and how bunched up everything is, because not only do you have all of these farms that get affected just in this one county, and the concentric circles that go around where you have the control zone and then the surveillance zone, these concentric circles, you might have the one in the middle that caused the circle to be drawn and a control zone to be created where you got to get permits for everything to go in and out. But then you've got 7 other farms that are in that circle or more. Plus you may have giant operations. You could have egg plants there, egg processors there. You may have huge breeders for hatcheries, for restocking the broilers and for also restocking the egg laying operations. And so everything being bunched up like that causes this problem, which then is sort of the reason that I'll get to these slides. When those concentric circles start getting drawn and there's all these unwilling people that are included in those circles, and they start losing money because A, they can't move things out, B, they can't get things in, or they can't make deliveries of chicks to all these broiler houses who normally would have had their broilers out the door and they could take more. Now they can't take more because they're still under quarantine. So the backup and all of the induced losses, as I call them, they start to back up behind every single one of these farms. That there's all these other businesses that are losing money hand over fist in the middle of all this. USDA only pays for 2 things. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I want to do that so that we have as much time as possible. USDA pays for indemnity for birds or eggs, and USDA will pay the actual farmer who owns the premises if they contribute labor or do any of the the depopulation and disposal and the cleaning and disinfecting. So depopulation and disposal is D&D. Cleaning and disinfecting is the C&D. If the farmer contributes to those with their own labor in their own, at their expense, at their cost, then USDA will reimburse them, and that's called compensation. So there's 2 things: indemnity for things, birds or eggs, and then there is compensation, which is if you help the USDA. All those people in the yellow suits, as we were talking, that's why I wanted to say that. Those are USDA contractors who are brought in by USDA under a national contract that they have. I don't know if Maryland has it, but Pennsylvania also has a statewide contract for that kind of labor and that kind of temporary help. Very difficult stuff to find in this labor market. But the bottom line is, all this stuff you assume is U.S. government contractors unless otherwise, and that's sometimes a producer, the person that owns the land may very well contribute to the process. There could have been, there's probably some cases where they did it all themselves. That's generally not, I don't think that is the favored way to do it, but they can get paid for that. But nobody who has a hatchery gets a penny. Nobody that has, so if they're waiting to put new birds in all these houses, there's just nothing for them. There is no government program whatsoever for them. If they're an egg processor who's not getting, eggs in, or imagine any type of ancillary services that depends on this industry, they're not getting anything. And that caused a big awareness in our legislature to get involved. And to my knowledge, Pennsylvania is the only legislature that has done this, state legislature that has done this far. And I'll get to it in a second. There was a $31 million appropriation in our summer of 2022 annual budget, which would have been for the state fiscal year of July 2022 through June of 2023. And then there was a renewal of that appropriation in the last budget. So our legislature has now appropriated 25 plus 6 plus, I think there was only, it's slightly in excess of $60 million has been appropriated by the Pennsylvania state legislature over the course of 2 years to pay for all these other losses, all these other industries that aren't eligible to get anything from USDA. All right, I'm going to keep zooming. How many minutes do I have? Okay. All right, so let me go through and see if there was some good slides to talk about, and then I'll get right to this is just a histogram, as USDA calls them, shows you early 2022, the big spike, and this just shows you the incidence rate of cases. Here is the wild bird detections, which is an interesting thing to follow. If you ever are aware, there's this birdcast website that shows you the migratory bird patterns and how active they are by little blips that they put together on the radar screen, and then they show you what birds are moving when, in time, and you can run this thing to show me the last week of migratory bird activity in the United States, and you hit the button, and it'll show you where, what the volume of birds migrating. Very important to this whole outbreak. Okay, this shows you, this was a slide that USDA was using in a recent presentation that just basically shows you the things they do. And again, those people in the yellow suits, depopulation, disposal, virus elimination, and then their own staff compensation, and then surveillance testing is a thing that is usually shared between the states and USDA after the outbreak or prescriptive, surveillance testing. Okay, hang on. This is a couple slides that USDA, I thought maybe we'd get to it. We want to talk about vaccine, we can talk about that in the Q&A. Okay, again, this kind of shows the scope of the Pennsylvania poultry industry. One of the things that we have that I'm not sure Maryland, we have 3 vet labs. One at University of Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia, one in Harrisburg, which is the state's Department of Ags, and one at Penn State up in State College. The last time there was an HPAI outbreak in the early 1980s, our legislature actually enacted a thing and created a thing called the Animal Health Diagnostic Commission, which was to coordinate the activity of all 3 labs so that if this ever happened again, our labs would essentially be under one umbrella and could be managed together so that the best resources at each lab could be utilized in coordination with each other so they weren't competing, et cetera. That happened many years ago, and thank goodness it did. Okay. Now, does everybody know what the Red Book is? You ever hit the Red Book? The Red Book is the actual HPAI plan, foreign animal disease. HPAI is what that's categorized, an FAD, and the Red Book is the actual plan that USDA APHIS has in place to combat it. And it's about this thick, but you ever hear somebody say Red Book? That's this big, manual on how the disease is to be controlled. And that's where all the stuff with the concentric circles comes from, and how it is that what's the responses, what happens next. It's all in the Red Book. Then they have directives that supplement the Red Book to talk about like how they're going to pay indemnity and the sort of the administrative details. And they're mostly these administrative directives, which I have some listed in the back. This is a list. I'll just to save time. This is a list of things that we did after 2015 to get ready for the potential, because we never got it in 2015, thankfully, and I don't think you did either. It didn't even get closer to us than Indiana, I think. But the bottom line is we had quarantine orders already in place from the 2015 potential, like a truck washing, which is bullet number 2 here. We had a truck washing, cleaning and disinfecting quarantine order that was in place all the way from 2015 till now. And we would go around and look at the dirty trucks. You had that picture. And that was actually a thing that when I was at the Department of Ag, we'd all like take pictures of trucks. If you passed some poultry operator's truck and it was all dirty, we would, give them a call. And that was in place in Pennsylvania since 2015. We also had some other quarantine orders that had been in place and continue to be in place with regard to some of these live bird markets. Does everybody know what a live bird market is? I'm sure you got one in Baltimore, right? And and there's ones in DC, but it's generally for an ethnic food, sector, and they're selling, live chickens, live ducks, mostly. And I don't think turkeys, I don't see a lot of turkey going to live bird markets. But this is a thing that the plain sect and a lot of the smaller, sustainable ag people, they're getting a great return on their raw, commodity there, a much better return on the investment in terms of selling their birds at these live bird markets. This has been a whole wing of this outbreak to control these live bird markets and make sure that little producers aren't bringing in, birds from an unsafe source into a live bird market. Okay. Okay. And we had our permitting system in place. We didn't use it. Okay, I already described for you what USDA pays for: indemnity for birds and eggs, compensation for D&D and C&D activities. Now, the induced losses, that's the phrase that I use to describe all those other people who got nothing, who were eligible for nothing from USDA. And, believe me, they were loud in Pennsylvania, because when you reach the level of an outbreak like we did, particularly when everybody is so jumbled up on each other, it was easy to have Cecil County up there. Is it Cecil or Cecil? Cecil, okay. I got to say Beanie and Cecil a lot to get myself in it. Anybody remember Beanie and Cecil? Am I the only one who remembers that? The Cecil County, it's isolated. It doesn't have all of that, poultry operations all on top of each other like we had in Lancaster County. And that was just so complex. Okay. Now this tells you what Pennsylvania expanded to, and this is talking about the appropriation that occurred. I think it was 31 million the first year, and then it was only 25 million the second year. That's why I was saying I think it is in the 60 million range here, right? Yeah, 61? No, 56. Anyway, yeah, that's right. And it was 25 million for for industry members, ancillary businesses like hatcheries, et cetera. And then 6 million to help pay for all the testing, the hours and hours of overtime from everybody at the vet labs. I mean, it was just astronomical. Thankfully, we built a brand new vet lab in Harrisburg not long ago with Homeland Security money, because I'm sure Maryland was just like Pennsylvania. After 9/11, there was money flowing, to deal with biosecurity issues, Homeland Security issues, and we built a giant, new vet lab right behind our Department of Ag building from that funding, back in the early 2000s. Okay, our program is called the HPAI Recovery Reimbursement Grant Program, and that's now been funded to the tune of 50 million in 2 successive years. And here's what, let me go to the next one. Paul, what are we looking at? Can you give me just a minute or two? Okay, all right, so here's the two there. The way it worked is, we weren't sure or I should say, the Department of Ag wasn't sure how far 25 million would go that first year, and what kind of applications would come in from all these ancillary businesses like the hatcheries. So the first, there have been miscellaneous application periods and stages of this grant program. It was reimbursed up to 100% of the first 100,000 of eligible documented losses, okay. And then for everything above $100,000, it would be reimbursed up to 50% with and then you would reach a cap. If you got $1 million, you were exhausted. Okay, so it went, and so far with those as the basic ground rules, there's been a couple other additives to it, but we've spent 11.8 million. So in the end, the amount that the General Assembly had, appropriated was more than was needed, at least at this moment, but it never hurts to be in that position, that's for sure. And so that was a really great, thing. Where did the number 25 million come from? That's a very good question. I don't really know the answer to that myself. But, just like everything in government, sometimes, people put numbers out there and they may not be completely accurate, but thank goodness that we had that cushion. And then some people, we even had a round of this where 21 of these ancillary businesses actually were able to get more than 50% of everything over 100,000 until they reached the million. So we sort of relaxed, or Pennsylvania relaxed the rules in a subsequent round because there was some excess money. And now there's a second portion, or a sort of a side portion to this program, which is money for producers to implement better biosecurity. So you saw those pictures that Jon had, and that was a good example of how loosey-goosey it can get and how people are not prepared. Okay, so if you need to build some little, extra entries with the dawn in, doff off, dawn in, doff off. Yeah, and so if you need to build an extra entrance so that your people can go through the biosecurity before they get into the barn, hey, great, come to us with a grant application and we'll fund it. So this is for This is for extra and additional. We're all saying the word additionality these days. So we'll say there was an additionality requirement in this grant program. In other words, it couldn't be just helping you pay for what you were already doing. It had to be something new. Okay. That's okay. Here is a couple of things. Paul and I wrote this article for Southern Ag Today back in September, all about this idea of the induced losses and what Pennsylvania's legislature did. And then I also wrote a piece about it in this thing that is published by the American Ag Law Association, which is probably not even publicly available. I guess you have to be a member to get in there, I think. Maybe not. But in any event, there's links to them here, and that link will work for you because it's to our website. Here's the red book over on the right-hand side. You ever seen a thing that looks like that? That's the Bible. That's John, when you got there, I'm sure there was lots of people with red books under their arm. No? Okay, there you go. When they were yelling at you, they weren't like threatening to hit you with it or anything? Okay, now, USDA's website, Paul, one more little thing. USDA's website is a little messy, let's just say. And so I tried to create a guide that is telling you where to go to get the things that you need with regard to indemnity and compensation. Because I figured lawyers, that's where you're going to get involved in this. You're going to have some client or something, or you're going to have to get involved. And there are appeals, of course. So there's a whole appeal process. And we have some going on right now where people didn't like the numbers that they got for their birds because maybe it was some specialty species of duck. We got a ton of those. I'm saying that facetiously because we have like all this problem with these specialty duck species and what they're valued at, and that's and then we have lots of plain sex farmers who want to file appeals. Okay, I'm coming. All right, so there's links to the main documents. This last few pages is I have links to the exact documents that tell you how the process and procedure works. And there's basically this is the details of it. And then links to breaking down so that you can make sense of the USDA APHIS website. There's a section here where I have producer indemnity, and those are the governing documents, and then producer compensation, and those are the governing documents. And let me tell you, if this work hadn't been done to organize these on this page, you'd never find them because it's really hard, to find things on that website. It's very difficult. So with that being said, Paul, you want to go to questions? I can't believe I got through all that.
Yeah, do we have any questions? And if you are online, please type your questions in. I have my iPad open and people in the room can tell I'm holding both and trying to look for questions. Any questions in the room?
There was something I mentioned to talk about and I forget what it was.
Vaccinations.
Oh, yeah.
That's
If
a
anybody,
fun one.
we can talk about that quickly.
So I was just curious on the potential benefits or drawbacks of addressing the limitations. You're talking about indemnification, but anything with controlling HPI at the state by state solution versus like federal solutions and resources?
Well, I think from my experience, at least, 12 years at a Pennsylvania, at a state Department of Ag, the custom in this industry, and it's for any animal disease really, not just poultry, is that everyone just expects that the federal government will be the backstop for this, and the states don't, they're too busy, trying to keep other boats floating. So it's always just been that way. And that's why when Pennsylvania had this, appropriation for, compensation for these induced losses, that was such a revolutionary thing. I mean, are you thinking more in the way of state money to help cover losses, or more in the way of state manpower to do the work? I think that, well, I would say this, and we probably have some people who know the field better. In animal disease doesn't care where the state line is. So that's why the federal government's the one that's involved, because they got the power to go right across the state line and do whatever they have to do. So I think that's kind of why it's gone that way. I'm trying to think if there's any good war stories.
I'm actually seeing a trend. We're actually seeing some of the states are actually taking a bigger role, particularly out in like Iowa and all that. They've gone through this so many times. The USDA is more of a backdrop, and they're actually the ones on the front line doing everything. The USDA is more in the background, helping with the books, the paperwork, and the payments. We're seeing more and more of that being taken on by the states. And I expect that, like Hans and I were talking earlier, we expect that to happen here. The next one, we expect to see us doing more of it They'll still be in that background with that support and the logistics that they have, but we'll have to be doing a lot more of the manpower.
I do think those federal labor contractors, I don't know where they get those people to show up the way they do. And maybe people have war stories about it not working so well, but I think it's a lot better than if a state had been the contractor trying to bring in people like that.
I agree with you, but I think they need to do training.
Yeah, well, that's true.
They need to show up on site where they're trained, ready to go. But part of that is like you said, labor shortages. I don't know where, I mean, they were bringing in day laborers. So you don't have that professionality of
Yeah.
it. And going back, we had one farm on the one broiler farm we had in Maryland. He did all his own C&D. He did, he didn't do the depot, but he did all the C&D and everything after that. In fact, he was so good, they were actually asking him if he would go do other farms, but he said
Yeah.
no.
And one of the good little side issues to that is it's a way for you to keep your employees working and paid. Because when you're down, and you're a broiler grower and you got no income, you want to keep your people and have them not defect and go work somewhere else. So, it was a great, it's to be able to have that compensation keeps your employees on the payroll, for producers.
One thing we didn't mention through all this is the toll it takes on the farmers.
Yeah.
There is a huge mental toll when you go out there, and I think the farmer we were talking about earlier, I mean, he actually talked at one of our meetings, Tommy did, and his comment was, you just suddenly lost all your family and friends because you work with these people, your family has birds, your family are the ones you do, everybody you know is in this industry, and now all of a sudden you're isolated and you can't go around them, they can't go around you. So there's a huge feeling of isolation among these farmers. There's a mental toll. There is a difference between my birds are going to go to market for food or my birds are being used for this and they've lived their life versus we have to put them down for a disease. There is a mental toll on those farmers that we really have to address. So I know in Maryland we have programs for that, and part of that came out of the COVID response when we saw birds being put down for COVID. I was on farms, I saw a lady just sitting out there in her driveway crying. I mean, I don't know how to deal with that, but
And it doesn't go away. You don't like forget or be able to look the other way and like, oh, that was last year. And you have these giant compost, windrows, as they call them, because when all this started, particularly way back in 2015, people thought that these carcasses would be disposed of off-site in different ways. And there is provisions for that in the Red Book and everything. All that turned into a big nothing, I think. I don't know, for those of you, all that turned into a big nothing. There really is no answer to this other than compost them on the farm. And so when you got, 1.5 million birds composted on your farm, you're not going to forget that anytime soon because you got these giant piles.
it's miles long. You start looking at some of these piles.
And farmland that you could have been farming, and producing income from is now sucked up by these compost piles.
Any more questions?
One more.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
and this will probably have to be our last question.
Can you talk about the cost of depopulating, cleaning and disinfecting and
That's a tough one. I don't really, there are schedules in terms of like when they compensate a producer for assisting, but I'm not familiar with them.
I couldn't tell you the cost either because that was above my pay grade. That cost, my whole role in this was to get things done but yeah, there was, it cost several $1 million just. Yeah, I was gonna say, I can't remember. I know, I say how much money I went through of that. I'm sorry, but it's my tax dollars.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, I don't know how much came from the federal government, how much came from the state. It's a lot of different resources.
My exposure to the USDA personnel on the ground in Pennsylvania when we were putting down almost 5 million birds, they couldn't have been nicer and more cooperative on, so much of what was going on. And flexible, like with regard to the appeals from sometimes if people didn't like the number they were getting for their birds and things like that, they were very flexible. I mean, this was one time when, I don't want to say the rules weren't the rules, but, there was a lot of sympathy and, understanding, from the USDA employees. I'll say one thing, Paul, you talk about the toll.
I got to make one comment.
Yeah, okay, got it.
I would say that the USDA people, by and large, were good, but we've had some other issues too. So I can see Hans grimacing, because
Okay.
we had some issues with a couple.
In this outbreak, I wasn't so directly involved. I got on calls.
We have 30 seconds, Brooke.
Okay, one of the tolls, here's a little story from, the 2015 outbreak. The federal contractors that came in, a lot of them were like, ex-military and, all these people were being asked to the method of depopulation has varied over time. Now it is basically, ventilation assisted depopulation, which will leave, but there were manual ways to depopulate turkeys. And these ex-military and, these are stone cold, hard-nosed people who weren't going to do it, after they did it the first few times. I mean, this is not pleasant in any way, shape, or form. Vaccines. U.S. doesn't look like it's going anywhere near vaccines, in the immediate future, because it messes up the testing. Because if you have a bird that has the antibodies in there, just like the COVID test, if you have the COVID antibodies, do you have COVID, or did you get the vaccine? So it's the same thing. The birds are going to show up as if they're positive if they're vaccinated. So unless you have a more developed, and maybe I'm oversimplifying that, but the bottom line is messes up the testing regime that we're relying on now. So that's it.
All right, thank you guys. So give them a round of applause. And you all take a 15-minute break. We will come back at 5 minutes after the hour to start the final panel.